Welcome birders to Atu.
My project called Birder Brain, the project where we explore the connection between birding and mental health and physical health as well, because it's all connected. But I think just giving yourself those times to connect to nature and getting that bit of peace will help you overall. I started birding for my mental health without even knowing.
Hello, birders. Welcome to the Big Year Podcast. I'm going to do something very different for this episode, which is I'm not going to edit hardly anything because Kelly Sue and I are talking about mental health issues, challenges that people, and especially in this case, birders, have. And the idea is not to cut out the parts that are challenging to us. And in this case, you can even hear in my opening monologue that sometimes I have trouble getting words out because of different mental health challenges I have. And so Kelly Sue and I are going to discuss that in the following podcast. So bear with us when we go off on tangents where there might be some long pauses. I might take out a little bit of the longest pauses, but I'm not going to take out too much because I want you to understand what it's like to deal with these issues. And if you do have your own cognitive and mental challenges, that it's okay and we can talk about it. And if you need help, there's always people you can talk to and people that can definitely give you advice and make it feel more like it's actually okay. And take some of those challenges like OCD and ADHD and put them to use in your everyday birding life. Because all we're really after is success and the ability to get out there, enjoy the birds, and enjoy everything life has to offer, even when we have certain mental and cognitive challenges. Lots of people have, but don't necessarily want to admit. So, thank you for joining me. This was a quick intro, and now let's talk to Kelly Sue, also known as Burger KS on the internets. Thanks and enjoy. And now it's recording. Welcome to the Big Year Podcast on the road, actually on the boardwalk in Rondeau Provincial Park, where the last time I talked to Kelly Sue, did you get married or was that Peggy Sue?
I got married a long time ago.
I think Peggy Sue got married long earlier than you did.
Yeah, probably.
And Kelly Sue is actually on her second episode, even though as you listen to this, she hasn't actually been on yet, but she is going to be on. It's like going back in time. It's kind of, my brain doesn't get around that. She was talking about her spark bird last time on the Big Year Podcast on the road, and it's appropriate that we're on the road again, if not here, prothonotary warblers, and if we're really lucky, maybe little baby prothonotary warblers will be flapping their wings asking for food.
And that's where we abandon the podcast.
That's right. You'll just listen to us going, baby prothonotary warblers.
Lots of editing will be happening.
That's right. Well, sometimes leaving this funny stuff in is fun. However, we are here to talk about not big years, even though that's the title of the podcast, but something I think is really important, and that is birding with at this point in recording, something was missing, and that was me talking about birding with cognitive issues, and in my case, OCD, ADHD, and Post-concussion Syndrome. But Kelly Sue is very knowledgeable on the subject, and let's get back to it. And open and talking about it, the fact that I've had it, but Kelly Sue has a very different take on it, and not only is she helping herself with birding in these circumstances, but she's helping a lot of other people. So I'm going to hand it off to you and let you tell me all about it.
Sure. So you're talking about my project called Birder Brain. And it's a project where we explore the connection between birding and mental health and physical health as well, because it's all connected. And I talk a lot, obviously, about how I came to be a birder and how birding helps my mind be quiet and helps me concentrate and helps me be more present and mindful. And
Fascinating, because I did not come into birding as a therapy for my mental health issues, but after multiple concussions and finally, after many years being diagnosed with not only ADHD, which I kind of knew as a kid I had something, but all they called it was hyperactive back then, and they didn't do anything about it. And then realizing that I have OCD, and plus I have post-concussion syndrome. And what I've discovered is that being out birding is almost the only thing that I can do that does quiet my mind, that allows me to sort of relax and not have 100 different things going on in my head. And when I'm at home, when I'm trying to do a project, I might have 10 of them happening all at the same time. And yet when I'm birding, it's the one thing. And how does that translate into training your mind to handle the everyday stuff? So when you are at home and you are working on a project, how does that help you concentrate and focus on just everyday home projects and life in general?
I think home things in life in general can still be really difficult, but I think just giving yourself those times to connect to nature and getting that bit of peace will help you overall. So I find that it just gives me better coping skill, be calm and just make better decisions, I feel like.
And one thing that I practice, which is kind of weird because I see a gazillion videos and articles about how to overcome procrastination. And for me, that is, I think procrastination is a good thing. Taking time to just forget about whatever it is you're trying to make a decision about, and whether it's birding or something else, what people don't realize about procrastination is all that stuff is still going on in your brain while you're doing this nice relaxing thing. And when you finally do get to the project or whatever it is that they would say you're procrastinating about, you're actually come up with a much better solution than if you, like you say, had just made the decision or done the thing on the spot under stress.
Yeah, that could be true for sure. I think um, sometimes procrastination doesn't work in my favor, but a lot of the times with my ADHD that I can hyper focus feels good.
That's what I will do with just even editing these podcasts. I have a podcast that I need to upload and publish on July 1st, and I'm only 5 minutes into a 45-minute podcast. But as the wheels turn in my head, when I get home today and tomorrow, I will just sit and get it done. I think a lot of us with ADHD probably were the ones that did our essays and school projects the night before.
Test studying.
And
yeah.
and I never failed any of these things.
Same.
I may not have got the A pluses, but no teacher that I ever handed in a book report for ever knew that I read the first chapter, the dust cover, and used Cole's notes to write the essay. I never got, and I sat there with Cole's notes and wrote essays and book reports all the time and passed every one of them, got good grades, and not a single teacher ever figured out that I cheated.
It is a skill. I don't know if I was as good at that skill as you. I used to take fiddle lessons. I play the fiddle. And every week I would refuse to practice. And then I practiced like nonstop for like an hour before my lesson. But every week my teacher was like, "You didn't practice this week, did you?" I'm like, "Oh, this isn't working
you
for
had
me."
you had smarter teachers than I did.
Maybe.
Or else the fiddle is
Maybe,
really difficult.
maybe because it was one-on-one. Maybe teachers in the classroom don't really have the opportunity to notice exactly what everyone's up to. But my teacher knew.
So tell me about how, just in general, you go about your birding life. What is your philosophy of birding? I know I'm a chaser, and I know I've seen you on rare bird chases as well, but I'm sure that is not the highest priority for you as a birder. How do you see birding?
It's certainly not my key focus to chase, and the story I tell people is starting to have more of a detrimental effect on my mental health because I couldn't get out all the time. I really started thinking about why I started birding in the first place and how it used to feel, and how and what was I doing when it felt nice like that, how when it felt good and it felt like it was helping me. And I really had to think about that for a while. And luckily, I was in trauma therapy at the time, and my therapists were able to help me work through that too, and come to the conclusion that I started birding for my mental health without even knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it became an obsessive thing, because I felt good when I was out. So I really connected more with like a mindful birding approach where I was just practicing being present and practicing mindfulness and taking my time and it was a real challenge at first for my ADHD to practice sitting in one seat 20 minutes, which is generally what I do now. I'll walk for a while, sit for 20 minutes, walk for a while, sit for 20 minutes, unless I'm really seeing a lot. But I was rewarded with watching just the coolest behaviors of our common birds, or sometimes seeing something that wasn't as cool.
That was really hard for me when the calendar turned from 2022 to 2023 because I spent a year on the road. So done an eBird list every day for 5 consecutive years.
Yep.
And it was not a chore, but it was, I had to physically restrain myself from birding on January 1st. And once the streak ended,
It was easier.
it was like, oh, this is nice. Now
Kind of a relief.
so I spent a lot of the days taking some of your advice this year and just doing mindful birding. I have chased a number of rarities like the white wagtail, and sort of have with a few of the birds I didn't see last year, so I could get them. Let's hope that limpkin gets here soon. And so I do find that it is such a relief to take that approach of mindful birding, because birding has always quieted my mind. If I am in a stressful situation and I can't make a decision, I just said, well, I might as well just go birding. Even, I mean, there are times where going birding is the exact wrong thing to do, and it's not going to solve a single problem. But in the long run, it's better for your mental health when you do have some of the conditions that we have.
Yeah.
And so many other birders out there who don't realize, and people who do have mental health issues that don't realize that they can take up birding and it could literally change their lives. I mean, I've talked to people who have been through head trauma who said, "Oh yeah, you should you should do crocheting or knitting," and and that all of us that have laugh at the people who say just crochet when birding. And I can't think, what other activity could you do that has all the components that can relax your mind, stimulate your mind, educate you, get you out for exercise, and do it all because you're looking for a bird. There aren't a lot of things that can help you that much in the mental health, you know, what's the word? Panoply. I'm going to mess that word up. I'm going to edit this part out in the. I gotta come up with the word.
It's all right. I had like lots of memory loss or word loss. It happens to me all the time.
My word loss is, and see this. I think this is important to leave in.
Yeah.
Because my word loss is nouns. If you get me talking about anything that isn't connected to trying to remember specific things,
right?
I never shut up. I tell people, just please tell me to shut up or interrupt me and just keep talking. It's the only way to get me to stop sometimes, which is why I love hosting podcast shows.
I don't think I've heard a specific word loss like that before. So that's interesting because now that I'm thinking about it, I think mine,
But
sometimes he comes up with it though, and I'm like really impressed.
and Sue is frustrated by the fact that I start conversations in the middle that I've already had in my head,
I do the same thing.
and what are you talking about? And it's like,
It's like, what
well,
do you mean you didn't hear inside my head 2 minutes ago? I've been ranting for 5 minutes now. You didn't hear me?
and I will not be able to say the word, and she'll be like, "Well, how am I supposed to know what the word is?" It's like, because of the context I'm telling you it in, and you have to. The spouse has to give you a little bit of leeway, but you also have to give the spouse leeway for not
Reading your mind?
reading your mind and accepting that
Yes.
maybe there's a reason why she doesn't understand you. So it is a dynamic between couples, especially, that can make it very difficult to understand each other.
Hmm.
And one of the things that works for us, though, is, guess what?
Birding.
Birding. We go out birding, and the hardest thing we have to communicate about is when the bird is in the tree. It's like, what tree? Well, that tree. Well, yeah, but there's 6 trees. But that's, every birder goes through that conversation. So that normalizes our relationship. Now, I don't know how much you go birding with your spouse or your kids. How is that either part of your life or part of your life that you need to get away from?
My husband and my son are very introverted indoors people. I can get them out occasionally, so that's
Mm.
always nice. It's just getting them out can be a struggle sometimes. Now that my son is a bit older and my husband's working from home, he will come on walks with me now, and he does enjoy birding. He's not obsessed like me, but show him some black and orange birds, and he gets pretty excited. It's his favorite.
Oriole was basically because when I was a kid, the Baltimore Orioles were my favorite baseball team. And when I started birding, I knew that there were Baltimore Orioles, uh, Cardinals, and Blue Jays, and regular sparrows. That was my
Right.
favorite thing. Was, well, aren't those just regular sparrows? No, we had a Vesper sparrow in the yard. Well, I thought that's just one of the regular sparrows. No, when you have a Vesper sparrow in your yard in suburban Toronto, that's a good thing. That's a rare bird. And that never even occurred to me in the first 10 or so years of our relationship, that be such,
Mhm.
to start to getting into birding with her could be so helpful for my mental health and just my ability to learn something and focus on something.
I think since we set up a lot of feeding and water things in the backyard for the birds, like birding than I am. Like he'll sit there all day and be like, "What's the birds doing?" Well, he'll text me when I'm out doing something else. Like I'll be out birding in nature, and he'll be like, "Guess what just came to the feeder and what it's doing?" And I just think it's so funny. But like he's getting pretty good at recognizing. And I think for me, it's a bit of a mix. Like sometimes I want to get away from things and go out alone, and I need that time. And sometimes I want to meet up with people who to have somebody that matches you in the energy of your excitement.
Well, and that's the thing. Uh, I'll always ask Sue if she wants to come out and go birding with me, and I am never disappointed when she wants to come along, because I know
Mhm.
I'm going to get as much thing that you've probably encountered some people with. I don't know if it's an issue with yourself. One of the things I learned about myself that explained my entire previous life was that I have social anxiety disorder. I knew that I hated to be in groups. I didn't,
Mhm.
that if I had to do something in front of the family as a kid, I would get stomach cramps and have to run off to the bathroom and wouldn't come back until, but these were serious, these were real cramps. I wasn't just running off, and these caused actual, social anxiety can cause actual physical and
Sounds like
health issues in your body.
yeah.
And having been diagnosed with irritable anxiety issues are like the thing that triggers it the most. And one of the things I've noticed about birding is that you can have a conversation. You don't have to ask how they're doing or, what have you been up to? You just can stand there, look at a few birds, and then say, gotta go. Or, in fact, with birding, you can just literally turn around and walk away, and not a single other birder will think that you've been rude. And I can't think of any other situation, whether it's out playing a sport or dog walking, that someone would not be offended that you didn't even ask how their day was going, and you just turned around and walked away. What have you experienced in that part of with some of the birders that you've encountered or yourself?
I do have generalized anxiety disorder, and same with you. That I would call myself an introverted extrovert. People always assume I'm very extroverted because I am very talkative, especially if you're meeting me out birding, because then don't generally get to talk to people about. So when I come across that person, I'm usually more talkative. So I don't enjoy going on big birding walks. I like leading them, but I don't love joining them so much. But same as you, if I come across a group of people birding, I can be energized by that. But sometimes if I'm really not in the mood, I'm happy to just walk on by. And like you said, nobody really thinks much of it. Like in general, I think a lot of we are, and they may not know that's why they've come to birding, but that if they looked at it, they might see that.
And that's what I did. I looked back after my last appointment with my neurologist, and they put me on some of these medications, and I was able to go look back at my entire, if you're 6 years old, you're going to get quickly diagnosed and quickly put into whatever programs. As my son was, he was put into a special program so that he could graduate from high school, and is one of the smartest people I've ever met. You said you don't like going on bird walks, but you like leading bird walks. The every part of my life that I've noticed is that I don't want to be just a part of a group, but I can host a podcast, but I wouldn't want to be a guest on a podcast. I was a magician for 40 years because I was the person up at the front of the group. I have volunteered in schools and led nature walks for kids in schools, done projects. For me, it's not a social activity. For me, it's all you people are over there and I'm over here. And I it's actually a symptom of this.
It is a symptom of anxiety for sure.
That you just don't want anybody to get a word in edgewise. And I have to, a lot of times when I'm editing the podcast, I cut out a lot of what I say and let the podcast focus on the person talking to, because I just realize how much I'm going on and on and on. And in this case, in this particular podcast, I think that's important for people to. We are witnessing part of the whole ADHD thing, because
I'm trying to flick ants off the rail, and they're
while we're sitting here, 90% of our attention is actually not on the conversation, but our eyes are all up in the trees and looking beyond us. I was talking to someone yesterday, and while we were talking, he was watching the hummingbird that was coming to my feeder behind my head, and I was like, oh, there's a great blue heron flying over. And we literally can't not look for birds. I talked to someone a few years ago, he said, I said, and he said, I'm birding the moment I walk out my front door. And I thought, that's true. You can't, because you almost drove off the road because you're looking to see if it was a red shoulder or a red-tailed hawk.
I'll be talking to people. We're not talking about birds at all, and I'm not birding. It's just random people I could be speaking to for any reason. And I'll be in the middle of a conversation, and I'll just ID the bird that flies by and then keep talking. And then I'm like, that's probably not normal. I'm like, oh, look, there goes it. And I'm like, oh, sorry. I'm like, it's a tricky culture right now, actually. But yeah, I've done that many times. And even at my therapist's office, there was often, well, not necessarily, I hear the conversation happening and I'm listening, but it's easier for me to listen when I'm looking all around.
Sue says, you might be a better driver if you weren't looking out the left window all the time. and it's because that's the easiest window to look out to see if there's a bird on a wire.
Yeah. I worry about that sometimes. I really try to focus. It's hard because I am always kind of scanning the side of the road.
Because you never know when a rare owl or a northern hawk owl, because every time a northern hawk owl is reported, it's because someone was looking out their window while they were driving.
Look, one time I drove an hour away from where I lived in New Brunswick to see a northern hawk owl. It was a lifer. It was an eruption year. So I drove, I spent like 45 minutes, an hour on the side of the road looking at this bird. And then I drove home because it was getting dark and the sun was setting. And I was driving closer to my house, so about an hour away from where that hawk owl was. And out of the corner of my eye across the road, I saw an owl in a tree, which never happens, like just on the top of a tiny little pine tree. And I was like,
oh, you got a friend.
So, what was that?
That was
It's a
that
dragonfly
was,
of some sort. Just landed on my shoulder.
That was a pair of dragonflies in a mating throws
I have
your shoulder.
I have a great mating shoulder, I've been told.
Yes,
and listeners, good luck following these conversations. But anyway, I was driving back across the causeway and I saw this owl on the tree, and I was like, I hope it's a different owl because I hadn't seen a lot of owls at that point. I was still a fairly new birder. And I pulled over to the side of the road and called my birding mentor at the time. And I said, Roger, I just found another hawk owl. And he's like, no, you didn't. He's like, because he was like, you're a new birder. There's no way. And I'm like, but I can tell pictures when you get home. I'm like, okay. And I sent him pictures. They're like, wow, you actually did see another northern hawk owl. That's amazing. So I'm like, that warrants a tattoo. So I did that. It ended with this tattoo with the date that I did that December 26th in 2012. So it was actually very cold as well because it was the middle of winter. But I got some really great photos of this owl with the moon behind it. It was a little blurry because it was dark, but yeah, it was pretty funny. You do miss things if you don't scan the road.
Yeah.
So you just have to do it safely.
You also miss the car that slams on its brake in front of you sometimes, and
yeah.
scare your spouse in the passenger seat. And yet she still lets me drive.
I don't think I've had any near accidents.
I've never had an accident from birding.
I think more
my accidents have been from just making random right turns and missing something. And yet I was totally paying attention to the road. And that's where I've gotten some of my concussion, have another concussion, which is, that every time you hit your head, there's a better chance of hitting your head again. And situation. A lot of people don't realize that some of what they think are just PCS. I had no idea what PCS was and why the football players were suing the league, and players would get knocked out and they'd continue playing in the game. And pretend is you can get back to playing, but the additional concussions that these players sometimes get is cumulative, and I didn't know that. And the fact that I could be diagnosed with that, be treated for it, and be something I'm thankful that I got into even before I knew. And like you said, some people are into birding without knowing that's why they're into birding.
I was like that for like a decade, and I think maybe on some level I thought it was assisting with my depression and anxiety that I had been diagnosed with without really thinking too deeply about it. Mine is more inattentive, not hyperactive. Therapy and possibly medication if you need it, and all of these extra things like birding that we do, but it certainly has blocked the use of a lot of my brain, which is where I get my word loss and memory problems and inability to learn new things. And it had really affected my birding, and that was really starting to depress me because I felt frustrated when I go birding and be like, I know that bird, I know that song, why can't I recall it? And I think that's part of also why I returned to the more mindful birding, is because it was giving me the permission. And I really do talk about this a lot with Birder Brain, that you don't have to know how to identify birds or bird song to be a birder. If you like being around birds, looking for birds, watching birds, then I'm happy to call you a birder. Because I think if anybody's finding joy with birds, then they're a birder. And we should be stressing the ID thing so much. It's not so easy for everybody, like I can identify quite a lot of birds and I've seen a lot of birds, but not everybody has. And I don't think we should put that pressure on them to enjoy it, because a lot of people have dropped out of birding because of birders they've met.
And one of the things I've enjoyed a lot about knowledge, I still remember and keep in mind whenever I'm birding that in January of 2012, I knew nothing, and everybody I ran into that, and I find that give back to, and that's why now I'm starting to like leading walks. At Together, we can find that together, and it's nice to just, just
birds they've never seen before, especially when someone is brand new. And I've helped people who were brand new birders start finding life birds who've now surpassed me in the amount of birds they can find that they've seen and they can identify. It's pretty impressive. Because they're younger than me and their brain still works.
And well, yes, I will admit that some of these young birders from some of them from 15 to 21,
Yeah.
there's this little bit of ineptity, but it's this, I hate them. You know,
I love it.
I mean, I really love it, but it's like I hate
Yeah.
that they are so good, and I've been doing this for so long, and I'm not that good. But every one of them, I'm like, I can learn from you.
I feel like I'm like a birding mom sometimes. Like I feel like a proud mom sometimes of these kids that are out birding. And I can remember when some of them were starting out and they would message me and ask for ID help. And now I'd be hard pressed for them. I'd probably be messaging them and asking for ID help at this point. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And
and I think the message here is that if you want to be a chaser and you get joy out of running around your community or the province or the country or even North America chasing rare birds, and that gives you joy without making you depressed over missing the birds, then, and we all have that.
yeah.
We all have our regrets about the bird we drove 5 hours to not see.
Yep.
Then that is what you have to do, and don't let anybody tell you you can't be a lister. There are people who with a sort of condescending tone, and that's not true. Listing is brain therapy for some people.
I had this conversation with one of our mutual friends too, who's a younger birder who's also very accomplished. It gives him dopamine to see these rarities and chase birds. And I'm like, go for it. I'm like, all I ask is that people also take the time to bird in the other way. Take the time to go watch bird behavior, take into something that's a little bit more calming, and
one of the things that a birder we all know in Ontario, Gene Iron, taught me on January 12th, 2012, when I was barely into birding. I went to see my very first king eider, male king eider, which if you've never seen a male king eider, they're just the most beautiful bird. But because I was just so new to it and all I was interested in is ticking off birds, I looked at it, and Jean even let me look at it through her scope. And that's had to each other everywhere, and we know each other, which is fantastic. But I was about to kind of move off, and she said, "Well, aren't you going to stay and study it?" And that that never occurred to me, and that is one thing that I will always, even if I focused on getting off to the next location, that is something I will always make myself take 5 minutes even and just look at and enjoy the bird. And sometimes the chasing doesn't allow you that, but I think that is very important as well as part of birding. But again, if that's not how you want to bird, and if whatever you do calms your mind, helps you with whether it's your OCD or your ADHD or you have post-concussion syndrome or traumatic brain injuries, then do that. Don't let anybody say that's not the right way to bird. Birding is a personal journey as health in very different ways, and I just believe birding is unparalleled in what it can bring to people.
But I love showing kids stuff. Like if they're walking by with their parents and I can see they're not birding and I'm looking at an owl, I'm going to say, "Have you seen an owl before?" And I don't really listen well.
I was at Humber Bay years ago, and there was a little kid with binoculars. I had just come from the pond and had seen a lesser stop, which was where in the summer. And I said, "Oh, are you looking for birds?" And he said, and Mom said, "Yeah, he's very avid now." And I believe mother and kid probably didn't know what that was, but they followed me into, a secluded area, and I pointed it out, and they got to see it. And the mother was so impressed and thrilled that somebody was going to take her 8-year-old kid to see something that he had never seen before.
And of course, if I run into someone and go to show them the bird, then I'm going back in, because it's exciting to go find that bird with someone and help them see it. Like, that gives me a lot of joy. So, and I appreciate it when people do that for me. They do it all the time.
As I was saying to some of the birders who have done big years, who have gone out of their way to make sure that someone who was competing with them for the top spot for the big year could see a bird, even if that might mean that they jump one ahead of them or tie them. And
that's good character.
Yeah, and no, I don't think there's any other sport where your opponent will help you win.
And I don't think all birders are like that, but
they're probably not, but I've been lucky enough.
In general, I think the biggest, competition I've viewed and kind of person was last year when you were competing, and a bunch of our friends in Ontario were doing a big year for Ontario. And it was nice to see that camaraderie and how they were helping each other. Because I don't need any, I call it the birders exit to my husband. I'm like, if I tell him I'm on my way home, it means I'm going to walk out of the trail now.
But that
could
mean
take
I'm
me hours.
not going to go back. Well, I would love to thank you for joining me on the podcast now that we're official again. We have to stop and talk about stuff that has nothing to do with anything you'd want to listen to. And
we might leave some of that in too.
Yeah, we might. And because there were some tangents that we went off on, but it speaks to some of the issues that we live with every day that I think people who are embarrassed by them, try to hide it from their family and friends, need to realize that this is just life, and it's important to have other people not be upset with us, but understand why we are like we are, and why we run off to go birding by ourselves for 8 hours, because of how much it helps us. Maybe, come along birding with some of those people in your life, and why they're so nerdy and geeky, and you might discover that you can't go anywhere without a pair of binoculars either.
That's our hope.
Thank you for helping me educate other people on some of these issues. Where can they find you in the social media ethernet?
On Instagram, I'm at birderbrain.com, and you can find episodes where I've filmed short documentaries about birders and written interviews, and I also share a lot of tips and hints and things, and just really connecting a community. So if you want to join us, we'd be happy to have you. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for Season 1 of the Big Year Podcast. So much thanks to Kelly Sue for coming on the show and helping me get the message out to a wider audience that mental health issues need to be talked about and not hidden away. So I hope you enjoyed the episode and learned a little bit about living with issues such as Attention Deficit-Hyperactive Disorder, OCD, which is Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, Post-concussion Syndrome, and social anxiety issues. Boy, I think that's the entire list of what I have to live with. Birding is such a great way to help deal with some of these issues, and there is no one right way to bird. A big thanks to all the birders who made Season 1 possible, especially to Sandy Comito, who generously accepted my invitation to be my first guest. I'll be taking a break for the holidays, and the Big Year Podcast will return on March 1st, just in time for spring. I See, unedited is fun. I'll have a new lineup of guests, including Christy Martin and Danny Bernard from British Columbia, Brett Forsyth and Andrew Keaveney from right here in Ontario, and Natasha and Dundee Fontaine, who did a Florida Big Year in 2020. As a special bonus, a big congratulations to Natasha for being selected by the American Birding Association as Bird of the Year Artist in 2024. So that should be fun and exciting to talk about. Oh, and one more thing. Beginning in 2024, I will be hosting a whole new show. Who's on First? The podcast. Conversations with players and coaches about their experiences and what they sometimes talk about at first base. I spent over 40 years as video coordinator for the Toronto Blue Jays, and I've been working on this new podcast since I retired from the team in early 2021. So now I'm finally making it a reality. So stay tuned for episode 1 in January of 2024 with my first guest, Lyle Overbay. Well, that's all, folks. Thanks for listening, and you'll hear me again in 2024. And as always, may the birds be with you.